Hello readers, welcome to the second part of your anticipated releases of the year 2026. We're talking July and December, and as per usual, we have quite a few books to get through, and I know you're busy with all the reading you need to do, so I'm going to try and keep it concise with a couple of things to mention first. One, thank you for sending all of your anticipated releases. For those who have participated in the survey, thank you. We appreciate it. Second, I'm obviously personally not always familiar with all of these titles when I put these together, so the tags noted in the slides are very much from Goodreads, which are user data. If there's anything that is miscategorized, speak to them. And thirdly, very similarly, publication dates. They vary per location sometimes. I've done my best to try and find the dates that are currently available, and I have tried to stick with the UK dates because I am in Scotland, so that is my location. But if not an exact date, then it's an estimate. It's fine. Lastly, I think in part one, we had quite a lot of third in a series, or like fifth or seventh. We had a lot of sequels, like far away into the series. This time, I'm very happy to say, because it's always nice to wrap something up, we have a lot of conclusions. We have a lot of lasts in the series. Feel free to screenshot the slides or pause the video and grab a piece of paper or a notebook to note down any titles that you would like to explore a little bit further later. And I think we should just let's get into it. July, we start with 15 new releases. With a very strong start. On the 3rd of July, we have the 6th volume and the conclusion to what started as an online comic of the queer coming-of-age romance story, and it got published traditionally, got made into a series. It's all very exciting, but it's coming to an end, which is bittersweet, but also beautiful to see. And as you can see with the 2 hearts noted there, very anticipated by you. Similarly to part 1, I've noted with 1 heart when it got above average amount of love in the anticipated releases list. 2 is very close to the top 3, but not quite there. And 3 stars will mark the top 3 choices. I will tell you about those later. On the 7th of July, we have a sequel in the Dearly Beloved series. It's called The Exquisite Torment of Loving Your Enemy. On the 8th, we have a new cozy sci-fi by Rebecca Thorne, who's the author of You Can't Spell Treason Without T. And side note, I think that is a brilliant title, Lost in Space. Beautiful. On the 9th, we have the first horror on the list. It's called The Burn Line. It seems to be set in London and the underground, and also has a bit of a amnesia about it. Sounds interesting. Thank you for bringing attention to this, because I had no idea this is a book coming out, and now it's on my radar for sure. On the 14th, we have a new historical fantasy called The Eye of Leviathan, and this is from the author of Mask of Mirrors. On the 14th, maybe, perhaps, because this was in the previous part as well. I think it was around December. I don't know if it got delayed or what's happening. Don't hold me to it. But perhaps on the 14th, and perhaps in July, the novella of Six of Crows by Lee Bardugo, A Darker Shore, comes out. And from the author of Someone You Can Build a Nest in, cozy humorous fantasy called The Dragon Has Some Complaints. Beautiful title, once again, coming out on the 16th. Continuing with July, on the 21st, there's a sequel to Arcana Academy, which is a dark academia fantasy. It's called Prince of Swords. On the 23rd, a new retelling from an author who has written Spin the Dawn and Six Crimson Cranes. This one's adult. I want to say it's maybe the first adult by the author, but I'm not 100% sure, so also don't hold me to it. On the 28th, another popular choice was Theodora's Tea Shop, which is another cozy fantasy, and a sequel on the 29th of July called The Thief and the Traitor Bride, and this is the sequel to The Second Death of Locke. Sorry, my notes are all over there, so... Still in July, and now on the 30th, a new book by the author of God Killer, and as far as I can tell, this is a standalone. It's called The Snake Among Swans. Also on the 30th, the second book and the sequel to Immortal Consequences, and also a conclusion to the series, because it's a duology. It's called Ruinous Ends. Another sequel, this one's called Daybreak. It's a sequel to Nightshade, and the series is called Sorrow Song University, comes out on the 30th as well. And Rootbound, which is a retelling for young adults, maybe middle grade. It was a little bit also conflicted online, by the author of Little Thieves, which I know is quite beloved. A little Tangled retelling. Now on to August with 13 titles here, and we start with a very anticipated book, a third in the Shadow of Leviathan series, and a conclusion to the entire series. The first book is called The Tainted Cup. Love the first book, still haven't continued with the series, really want to. This will be a very good reminder to do so. It is a fantasy, but a kind of mystery thriller shade to it all as well. Also on the 4th, by the author of Fragile Enchantments, is a new book called Immortal Game, and a second book to the Edge of Glass series, and also a conclusion to the series called Dance with Death comes out on the 4th as well, which is a fantasy romance. Sci-fi book called The Demon Star with some horror tags online as well, coming on the 5th, with comps for this being Dune, Gideon the Ninth, and Red Rising. So really setting the bar quite high, but sounds intriguing. On the 6th, we have another book in the Assistant to the Villain series. I think this is the 4th. It is the 4th, but it's also, as far as I could tell, not a conclusion. It's called Adversary to the Villain, which is a cozy romance fantasy book. Also on the 6th, third book in the Spell Shop series, but also not a conclusion, as far as I could tell, which is a very popular cozy fantasy. And on the 11th, we have a gothic horror called Reliquary. I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm gonna be very real with you. But this is from the author of The Wolf. Continuing with August, on the 13th, we have a new Olivia Blake book. This one has a little bit more horror to it, I think, compared to the other ones. It is a gothic thriller fantasy. It's called Dreamland. Next one is the second book in Homegrown Magic series. It's a cozy romance with fantasy elements, and it's called Homeward for a Spell. And then on the 20th, we have a Barbie novel by Alex Astor, who is the author of Lightlark. And the next book is the third most anticipated by you guys on this entire list for this entire half of the year. And it is Daggerbound, a sequel to Swordheart, which I think actually came out quite a long time ago, but I could be completely wrong, so correct me. I did not double check. I should have, but I didn't. But I do feel like we do have a tendency to see Kingfisher and towards the top of the anticipated list continuously. So that comes on the 25th of August, and on the 27th we have conclusion to the Feybound series. This is the third book in a series called Earthbound. Also on the 27th we have a horror fantasy dark academia with vampires called She Haunts Me Still. And that's actually everything for August. Then we're moving on to the autumn months, which are by far the busiest for releases, I feel. And the list definitely reflects that. So in September, we have 17 titles and even more coming in October, but let's stick to this first. On the 1st of September, we have the sequel to The Night and the Moth. Very anticipated, understandably. It's called The Knave and the Moon. Also on the 1st, we have a new book by Kaylin Barron, who is the author of Cinderella is Dead. It is a paranormal horror for young adults called Tell the Ghosts I'm Gone. Next, a fantasy horror called Black Tail, coming on the 3rd of September. On the 8th, we have a new book by Victoria Aveyard, who is the author of Red Queen. I want to say this is the first one that is like definitely adult. I think the other ones were crossover or YA, but I could be wrong on that one as well. This one is centered around pirates. Also appeared on the list quite a bit. Not as much as R.F. Kuang's new book coming out on the same day called Taipei Story, which is a contemporary historical literary book, and R.F. Kuang, of course, is the author of The Poppy War and a lot of other books. Still on the 8th, we have a romance with horror thriller elements called Kiss, Slay, Replay. And this one is from the author of Play Nice and Cackle. And then on the 10th, we have the third book in Rewitch series, which is a very cozy series for urban fantasy, focusing on personal journeys and some romance and found families. And this one's called Disenchanted, coming out on the 10th of September. Still in September, of course, we have another Richard Osman book. This one is second in the series called We Solve Murders. This one in particular is called We Chase Shadows. This is an author of Thursday Murder Club. It is a mystery thriller, but with wholesome, cozy vibes as well. And the next one is your absolute number one anticipated release for this entire half of the year. Understandably so, because it is also a conclusion to a very popular book series. It's a dark academia setting and by a very beloved author. Of course, that's Leigh Bardugo. It's called Deadbeat. This is the third book in the Ninth House sequel list, but the actual series is called Astor something. What is it called? Alex Stern, sorry. I would just like to take a moment to wish everyone the most fantastic experience with this. I hope that the conclusion to this is as satisfying as it can be and it meets all of your expectations. Putting this out in the universe. On the 16th of September, we have a paranormal urban romance called Espiritu, but this is actually a sequel to Cemetery Boys, but I don't know if it's a direct sequel. I know there's quite a gap in between the releases, date-wise. It looks like it might follow the same characters, but I'm not 100% sure, but that's exciting. On the 17th, we also have a new book by the author of Station 11 and Sea of Tranquility, so that's very exciting for me also, as some of you clearly. This is a sci-fi speculative dystopian, which my favorite type is a bit more literary than my usual faves, but I am excited. It's called Exit Party. Also on the 17th, by the author of Sabriel. I don't know why in my mind I thought that was way more ancient than it must have been. Not that I have read it, but in my brain, that's like the beginning of an era. I may have to revisit some sort of fact checking there. But I'm also very excited to see that this is also a sci-fi. It's called Massive. Once again, putting out into the universe that perhaps we're going to have some sort of sci-fi resurgence. In general, I feel like this list, this half of the year, we always have some sci-fi because you are, of course, like-minded people. But I feel like even for us, there's a little bit more than we usually get. So my hopes are dangerously high. I feel like I'm gonna hurt myself here, but let's manifest. But very exciting. A new book by the author of Belladonna, new series, coming out on the 22nd. It's called The Wretched Divine. I know this one also has a lot of people excited. Continuing with September, a novella in a very popular series called Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber is coming out. And also a new book by John Green, who I think has not written a fictional book, and especially for adults, in quite some time. I could be wrong, but I think we had like some non-fictions, but not a fiction book, right? It's called Hollywood Ending. Very curious. Will you be reading? Let me know. And a new book by Madeline Miller, who is, of course, the author of Circe and Song of Achilles. As you would expect, it is still a mythology retelling. This one's called Mestra. And then on the 30th, a book called Our Cut of Salt, which is a horror gothic thriller and follows 3 generations of Palestinian women, is also coming out. And that, I believe, finishes our September lineup, and we're moving on to October, our busiest month actually, with 20 books on your anticipated releases. First and foremost, great news for Baldur's Gate fans, which very much includes the current household here. We have Kingfisher writing a Astarion story. If that's a prequel to Baldur's Gate, if that's something separate from that, I don't know. But I'm very excited to find out. We'll definitely be reading this one. I don't know if this means that we're gonna get for other characters from Baldur's Gate. I'm really hoping so. My playthrough, I'm gonna be honest, Astarion was not one of my, I know, very unpopular, sorry. He wasn't one of my lead companions, let's say. If you're curious, they were Karlach and Minsk, with some other ones sometimes. But I'm hoping if this one does well, maybe we're gonna get stories for others. I would be ecstatic if we had a Karlach book, but I'm just saying. Anyway, sorry. Continuing. Woodland horror called As the Snow Gathers on the first one as well. Then a new Stephen King book co-written with Peter Straub, which is a horror fantasy on the 6th called Other Worlds Than These. Also on the 6th, very anticipated by yourselves, also very understandably, it is a long-awaited conclusion to the villain series, which the first book is called Vicious. I'm sure you've heard of it. This one's called Victorious, and I'm again putting it out into the universe that I'm hoping that you're gonna get a very satisfying conclusion for those who are a fan. Also on the 6th, we have a contemporary horror called Carrying. Now on this one and a couple more, but this one also in particular, the release dates were very iffy. Everywhere I checked, they had a different date. So the 6th of October, but you know, maybe not. Who knows? Also, on the same day, a book called The Scarlet Ball, which is a gothic historical adult fantasy, comes out. And this is from the author who wrote Empress of Salt and Sorrow. No, Salt and Fortune, sorry. On the 8th, we have the 3rd book in the Hurricane Wars series, as well as a conclusion to the Hurricane Wars. I did say we have a lot of that. The plot twist of the century, I feel. A new book for Divergent in a alternate universe where there's a different faction at the very start of the story. The Sixth Faction is the book's name. Comes out on the 8th of October. I'm so curious. Unfortunately I wasn't someone who read the original. I think I read like the half of the first one or something. That was before YouTube and reader spaces. Didn't quite stick. I'm so excited for the fans of Divergent. I feel like you guys are gonna experience a whole new trip here. So that's happening. Also on the 8th, also happy for Truly Devious fans, because there's a 6th book called The Velvet Knife. I am getting such massive deja vu. I feel like this was perhaps in the previous batch as well. I don't know if the date moved or something, or if I'm just thinking of a different book, but it's another Truly Devious novel regardless, so if you're a fan, I hope you enjoyed that one. Still on the 8th, I think there's quite a few of those for this day. A Scholar's Guide to Demonology and Other Dark Arts, which is a new cozy fantasy. Also on the 8th is one of the few contemporary romances on the list, actually. We didn't have a lot this time around, called Bad Words. This is a will they, won't they romance between writers. A gothic horror called Night of the Thousand Hells, which is a translated work as well. 13th of October, we have a high fantasy, a dark fantasy sequel. Second book in the Black Tongue series, The Thrice Bound Fool. Also on the 13th, also a little bit of a plot twist, I guess. It's a sequel to The Time Traveler's Wife, which was released in 2003. I don't know if they're directly related. Don't know how much overlap there is. Also, for someone who is such a loud time travel lover, I've never actually read that one. So let me know if I should, if it's worthwhile. Now with the second one coming out, maybe I should. Let me know. Still very much in October, we have Peck and Peck, which is a contemporary literary fiction. It's by the author of Lessons in Chemistry, which I know is very acclaimed. On the 14th, we have a book called She's a Doll, which is a horror thriller paranormal book, and I believe it is actually about a doll that's possessed by someone who's looking for a killer. We've gotten to the second most anticipated release of this half of the year by you. I think it's probably the most anticipated release by me in this half a year. Definitely. I'm a huge fan of the author, huge fan of the other series. So thrilled that it made it into the list for you as well. Of course, I'm talking about Becky Chamber. It's a new sci-fi book. It's called As You Wake, Break the Shell. I'm so excited. I've not even read the synopsis. I don't think I will. I want to go into this entirely blind, but I feel because I know works by the author, I feel like I kind of know what it will be vibe-wise, and the rest can remain a mystery until I get my grubby hands on this. Another anticipated one, of course, to no surprise, is a very popular series, A Court of Thorns and Roses. Maybe you have heard of it. The 6th book is coming out on the 27th of October, so of course that made the list. 29th of October, we have To Dream in Darkness. This is a historical fantasy romance by the author of A Song to Drown Rivers. And the last book in October is another fantasy horror by the author of Don't Let the Forest In. It's called Scorpion Deep. November, we only have 8 books, but we have such well-known authors, at least to start with. We have Holly Black with the illustrated novella Folk of the Air series called The Conspiracy of Charming Monsters. Cassandra Clare, another series for the Shadowhunters universe. I don't know if this is the last one. There were some whispers when I googled, but not very reliable, so I don't know. You let me know. Then John Gwynne, also a massive name, author of Malice and Shadow of the Gods, epic fantasy adventure novel called The Wolves of War. And then a sequel and a conclusion to Braided Fate, which the first book was Warrior Princess Assassin, and this one's called Captive Traitor King. Third in a series and a conclusion to the series for Immortal Dark Trilogy, Infernal Vow, coming out on the 13th. Also on the 17th, you guessed it, third in the series and the conclusion to the series of The Wolf King. This book is called The Wolf Queen on the 17th. On the 19th, guess what? The third book in the series and the conclusion to the series called The Wrath Gods Reap. Then the series is called The Crucible. And to finish off November, we have a sequel to Rose and Chains called Vine of Hearts. And we only have 2 books in December. And not only do we only have 2 books in December, but they're both on the 1st of December. So I don't know if it's just because we don't yet always know that far ahead. Some books don't get announced. Maybe December is also not the best for releases, but interesting. Anyway, the first one is Call Me Traitor. It's by the author who gave us Winter's Orbit. Just a side note, I think this cover is fantastic. I love everything about it. It's so beautiful. And the last book on the list is a little novella for Red, White, and Royal Blue, which is a queer romance novel. And this one's called The Private Correspondence, which I'm assuming is probably gonna have their texts or letters or some such thing. But that was the last anticipated book on this particular list. Thank you and happy reading. Let me know what's the book that you have written down from this list, and if there's any books missing. Of course, there were so many submissions, not everything made into the list. It's already very long, and there's a fine line of as much as I can rapid fire at you before it becomes too much. But please use the comment section as an area to put out anything else you think other people might enjoy and may have missed. Of course, let me know what's your most anticipated read in general, even if it is on the list. And once again, thank you so much for being part of the community and letting others know what your anticipated releases are so that they can also find some that they may have missed. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.